and welcome to this virtual theater talk for Roundabout Theater Company's production of Caroline or Change by Tony Kushner with music by Janine Tesori. I'm Leah Reddy. I'm a teaching artist with Education at Roundabout, and I am speaking to you today from the land of the Lenni Lenape people.
Hi, I'm Nafisa Monroe. I'm also a teaching artist with Roundabout, and I am actually coming to you virtually from a small place that's currently known as Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's in Canada, and it is traditionally and currently the land of several Indigenous peoples. So please forgive me if I mispronounce them or if I've forgotten one, but I'm going to give you what I know. The Mississauga, the Neutral Nation, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee.
Caroline or Change, this is the first Broadway revival. It's going to open at Studio 54 in October of 2021, and it is the first show Roundabout is opening post the coronavirus pandemic. Little overview of the show takes place in 1963 in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and concerns two families, the Gelman family, who are Jewish Americans. Noah Gelman is a little boy, and his father, Stuart Gelman, and his stepmother, Rose Stopnick Gelman. Noah has fairly recently lost his mother and is struggling to deal with that change in his life. And his family's Black American maid, Caroline Thibodeau, and her family, which includes her three children. And she is likewise struggling to deal with the changes in her life. So those are sort of the people around whom this musical, which is sung through, turns.
Hey, do you want to tell us about that Stella Adler quote about understanding a play? You've got it in your head. I know you do.
Oh, I do. So this quote is something that our education dramaturg, Ted Sod, who for many years gave the pre-show theater talks, would always include. He liked to quote Stella Adler saying, "To understand a play, you really have to understand a playwright." And that is extremely true in this case, because as Tony Kushner, the writer of the book, has said, this is his most autobiographical work. So Tony Kushner was born in Manhattan to Jewish American parents. His family roots lie in Russia and Poland, I believe. And when he was young, his parents moved him to Lake Charles, Louisiana. His father was a clarinetist, something which also comes through in the story of Caroline or Change, and his mother was a bassoonist. And Kushner was raised in Louisiana, came back to New York to attend Columbia University in 1974, graduated in 1978 with a degree in medieval studies, which is really interesting, and then matriculated to NYU, to Tisch School of the Arts, to continue developing himself as a playwright and as a theater maker. His first play that is widely talked about is A Bright Room Called Day, which he wrote in 1985. But he had his really big breakthrough in the early 90s, in 1990 and 1991, with Angels in America, which went to Broadway in 1993. And it was that production that was directed by George C. Wolfe, who became a close collaborator of Kushner's and who he actually worked with on the Caroline or Change when it was being developed. After his wild success, Pulitzer Prize winning with Angels in America, he went on to write Homebody Kabul, Slavs, a version of the Dybbuk, which is a Yiddish folktale. He's written many plays, and he's moved on to also writing screenplays, including Munich in 2005 and the 2015 screenplay for Lincoln. So he's very active. I would say overall his work is characterized by a deep historical understanding of the United States and where it sits in the movements of world history, and also really an insightful look at what makes humans tick, what the motivations, both personal and political, are that drive our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the woman that he collaborated with, Janine Tesori, who is the musical composer and arranger of the piece, originally said no to working with him in terms of the script. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Janine Tesori. What I find interesting about her was that she actually gave up music for a little part of her life. So she started playing piano when she was 3 years old. She started writing songs when she was 5, but when she turned 14, she really wanted to focus on sports. So she stopped her music and she went to Barnard College, which some of you may know has kind of a sister relationship with Columbia University as well. And after a few semesters at Barnard, she was a pre-med major then. she realized that she really missed her music. So she changed her major to the Columbia University music program. And she graduated from there in 1983 and spent time conducting and arranging music for dance. But eventually she left that and wrote her first musical, Violet. And the reason I gave that dramatic pause, because Violet happens to be the first revival at Roundabout Theater Company that I witnessed, because that was the year that I was hired as a teaching artist. So I have a fond memory of seeing that show and that production, which was just incredible, incredible, incredible. And she's been writing and arranging music for musicals ever since. Now, some of her more critically acclaimed pieces include Twelfth Night from Lincoln Center in 99, Thoroughly Modern Millie in 2002, Caroline or Change, which got its Broadway debut in 2004, Shrek the Musical, and then in 2015, Tesori and writer Lisa Crone made history by becoming the first female writing team to win a Tony for Best Original Score for Fun Home. She has 5 Tony Award nominations, 1 Tony win for Best Original Score. She's got 3 Drama Desk Awards. And with all of that and many other awards, Tesori is actually one of the most decorated musical composers of our time, which is just incredible.
So this has a bunch of different genesises. I don't know if it's genocide, perhaps, in Tony Kushner's life. He wrote, when he was in school, when he was in college, a set of monologues called Scenes from a Louisiana Basement. And one of them featured a character sort of based on his family's Black American maid, Maud Lee Davis, speaking. And he also talks about having this extremely clear memory of watching John F. Kennedy's funeral on the television. And Maud, or Maudie as he called her, was ironing nearby. And he looked up at her and she was crying. And he had never seen her cry before. So that was sort of the place that some of these characters were rooted. I think at the time that he started working on this piece, he was also dealing with his grief from losing his mother, which happened when he was an adult, not a child, as it does for the character in the musical. But he's definitely thinking about grief and processing grief and that change as he's working on Caroline or Change.
Mm-hmm. And he actually said in an interview, he said, quote, "I wanted to write about race relations, the civil rights movement, and African Americans and Southern Jews in the early 1960s.
So there's a lot going into this piece for him.
A lot, political and personal, which is right where he likes to live as a writer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he completes the script and he speaks to his longtime collaborator, George C. Wolfe, because he wants him to direct it. And they decide that Tesori would be the perfect person to do the musical composition. They send it to her. She reads it and she says, "It's not for me." Then a little side diversion, a little side path happens where Kushner and Tesori are hired to work together on another project, which did not come to fruition. But in that project, Kushner realized how much he enjoyed working with Tesori. And so he asked her if they could sit down and talk about why she didn't want to do Caroline or Change. And her response was basically that the script wasn't written like a musical, right? She couldn't really find her in. She just thought she wasn't the right person to collaborate with. Then George C. Wolfe has this idea that the appliances that the lead character, Caroline, that the appliances that she interacts with are inhabited by the souls or the spirits of formerly enslaved folks in that area. And Tesori was able to hook into that idea, and she wrote her first song for this show. It's not the first song of the show, but it's the first song that she wrote for the show, called The Bus Song. And that was the impetus that basically gave her that in. That was the thing that she could hook into and really expand and expound this idea of Caroline or Change. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that this play musical touches on so many musical styles, right?
Yes.
Right? Like, and that it's not one musical style that you will get. You'll get blues, you'll get spirituals, you'll get Jewish folk music. There's and
Doo-wop, klezmer.
doo-wop, right? Each character, each appliance, each part of the story, each family kind of has their own, sometimes not necessarily theme song, but their own rhythm, their own vibe, if you will.
Yep.
And it's very different in that respect. And so it's not a traditional musical as we are kind of trained to expect in terms of somebody who goes to the theater often.
Yeah, it's not something where everyone, stops speaking and then starts singing and then tap dancers come out. It's sung through.
Yeah, it's
a little bit more like an opera in some ways. The show opened in November of 2003 at the Public Theater. And in April of 2004, it opened at the Eugene O'Neill on Broadway, where it ran for 133 performances and 22 previews. Yeah. So this is the first Broadway revival, but it's been done several times in England. And this is actually a transfer of sorts of a British production. So same director, same star, same show. Should we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Michael Longhurst, the director, and Sharon D. Clarke, the fantastic, incredible actor, singer, star of Caroline, or Change.
So this production originated at the Chichester Festival in 2017, and it transferred twice, actually, ending up on the West End, where Sharon D. Clarke won an Olivier for her performance as Caroline. It was supposed to open in March of 2020 on Broadway, the Roundabout production. Its first night of previews was supposed to be March 13th, 2020, and Broadway was shut down by the pandemic on March 12th. So during that time, the set remained on stage, the equipment remained in the space, just sort of waiting to be reanimated. And this is the moment. The show goes back into rehearsal this coming Monday. So we are recording in early September 2021. And we can't wait for it to open on October 8th. It's perhaps had the longest rehearsal process I've ever heard of.
Well, some places in the world, they rehearse shows for years on end, but it's always interesting to see, perhaps how the show has kind of sat with the actors and the artists and the director, and how that feeds and nourishes the actual performances. I think that'll be fascinating. I remember reading in the interview with Kushner, he talked about speaking with Michael Longhurst, the director, in 2017, and wanting to make sure that the specificity of the story, of the geographical place of Lake Charles, Louisiana, of the community of the Black Americans there, of the Southern Jewish community there, that he really wanted to make sure that all of those parts of the story were honored and understood, because Kushner recognized that in the UK, they may not have the same understanding of Jewish communities, and especially as Southern Jewish communities, and of the Black American communities. It can be a different nuance, a different complex. It can be differently complex. Let's just say it has its own.
That's a great way to put it. We have a quote to close out, right? Some closing thoughts about change.
Yeah. So Kushner, when he was talking about this concept of the civil rights and what he wanted to write about in the time and the change, he says, all liberation movements have in common that they are often fueled by the hope that it is possible to achieve justice without sacrificing your rights or putting yourself in danger. There is so much that we want to change, but we're afraid of being in danger of, some people don't want to go to protests because of mob mentality, or all of those things. And the challenges of wanting change, but not always knowing how to go about it, right?
Thank you so much for joining us. And we hope you enjoy Caroline, or Change, and that it inspires you to think about change in your own life and change in the wider world.
We look forward to seeing you live and in person in the theater soon. The Theater Talks will be live and in person again soon, but we're so excited to welcome you back to our theaters, even in these moments of change.